of the spyware in the 29 phones that were examined. However, the Congress party and its allies have doubled down on Rahul Gandhi's charge, saying it is a known fact that the government is spying on opposition leaders to silence and weaken its challengers. The big question that we ask today is, in the name of politics, is the Congress MP doing some real damage to the image of India, pushing rhetoric lacking in facts?
I've been called by intelligence officers who tell me, listen, please be careful what you're saying on the phone because we are sort of recording this stuff. Everybody knows, and it's been in the news a lot, that Indian democracy is under pressure, is under attack.
देश को बदनाम करने की ये साजिश बार बार जो विदेशी धरती से होती है, कभी विदेशी दोस्तों के माध्यम से होती है।
बोलने की आज़ादी भी नहीं, अपने विचार रखने का आज़ादी भी नहीं है, संविधान के तहत आप चलते भी नहीं, संविधान को ठीक ढंग से उसको जो मर्यादा देना चाहिए वो नहीं दे रहे।
When they use Pegasus against our opposition leaders, against our media professionals, against our civil society, then it's not an attack on democracy. But if we talk about it, it's an attack on democracy.
It is highly possible because everyone around the world today knows that democracy in India and our constitution is facing a threat.
हकीकत स्वीकारिए, अथॉरिटेरियन स्टेट के सारे फीचर्स हैं। आप जिस सरकार के मंत्री हैं और लोग इस बात को समझते हैं।
राहुल गांधी विपक्ष के बड़े नेता हैं, संसद सदस्य हैं। उन्होंने जो सवाल उठाया वो बहुत गंभीर है।
So is Rahul Gandhi's latest attack politics above and beyond facts? Let's compare the Congress MP's charges and what the top court, that is the Supreme Court, had ruled in 2022. On your television screens, ladies and gentlemen. Rahul Gandhi says, I myself had Pegasus on my phone. The Supreme Court has ruled 29 phones were examined with no conclusive evidence of Pegasus. Congress MP says, a large number of politicians had Pegasus on their phones. The Supreme Court ruling stated clearly that some malware was found in 5 phones out of all those phones that were sent for examination. But it doesn't mean it was Pegasus. Again, Rahul Gandhi has said in that lecture at Cambridge that intelligence officers warned him to be careful about what he says. The Supreme Court has ruled there is no evidence to back claims of Pegasus use. So now the question is the Congress MP peddling a narrative for sake of politics? Listen in to this reaction from Congress Chief Mallikarjun Kharge, who says that while it is an open secret that the government is spying on the opposition, he has no proof to back that charge.
बहुत से लोगों के टेलीफोन भी टैप होते हैं, लेकिन मेरे पास ये प्रूफ नहीं है कि किसका हो रहा, कहाँ हो रहा, कब हो रहा, लेकिन सभी लोग जानते हैं कि टेलीफोन टैपिंग कैसा होता है, राज्यों में हो रहे हैं और दूसरे लीडर्स के भी होते हैं, लेकिन वो बार बार बोलते हैं कि प्रूफ दो।
Joining me on the show, RP Singh, BJP national spokesperson. Bhavya Narasimha Murthy is spokesperson of Karnataka Congress. We also have R. Rajagopalan, senior journalist, NS Napinai, founder of Cyber Sathi. Bhavya, I'm going to begin with you because besides what has been said in the context of Pegasus, Rahul Gandhi had also spoken clearly about that democracy is under threat. This constant narrative of democracy being under threat, why is it being used? Mr. Rajgopalan, come in on this because Bhavya will be joining me shortly. I think there's a problem with the network. If the electoral outcomes or results do not give outcomes which is what the opposition or the Congress wants, then should it be seen as democracy under threat?
What Mr. Rahul Gandhi spoke in, deliberated in London is somewhat, which is mystic, which is, intriguing. Because the same gentleman, Mr. Rahul Gandhi, apologized before the Supreme Court on Rafale. The same Rahul Gandhi said about RSS and apologized to the district court. The same Rahul Gandhi was angry on SPG withdrawal by the Modi government in 2020. And second thing, Maria, I tell you, he misled Parliament. He tore out the ordinance of Dr. Manmohan Singh. He is not interested in attending Parliament, but he goes for Bharat Jodo Yatra. He has not put his, inoculation of corona, anti-corona. He was campaigning for Pfizer, not interested in Serum Institute, something. And my understanding is that Rahul Gandhi should speak less, walk more, talk less, work more. Because मुझे लगता है Rahul Gandhi has crossed certain limit, because he should not have spoken like that. Though he is little bit of, a very young and energetic leader, as I find that, he changed his attire, he changed his dress, he changed his style. So what does he mean? In short term, I have been watching Sidhu in Kapil Sharma show. So I find Mr. Rahul Gandhi has become a laughter challenge participant.
Okay.
And मुझे ये भी लगता है, जो नॉर्थ इंडिया में कहावत है, साउथ इंडिया में भी कहावत है, 7.5 शनि उनकी जीभ में है.
Acha. Before I bring in RP Singh, Bhavya is back with us. Bhavya, Rahul Gandhi raising Pegasus issue on foreign soil when the matter has been looked into threadbare by a Supreme Court appointed committee is not just being economical with truth, but also undermining the supremacy of the highest court of land. What could be Rahul Gandhi's motivation to do so?
Yeah, before this, I would like to, my phone was disconnected for some reason. I don't know who was the one who was speaking before me, but I would just want to tell them, nobody in this country can tell the other person to speak less. Moreover, this person, Mr. Rahul Gandhi, is the leader in the opposition. And he's supposed to speak. He has to be the voice of the people against this tyrant government.
Okay.
And he will speak. He's not scared of you. Second thing, to make fun of his attire, he should understand. He took a historic walk from Kanyakumari to Kashmir, talking to crores of people, understanding their problem, which their leader could not even think of or even dream of. They can't even do that. Coming to the Pegasus issue, yes. Rahul Gandhi was invited to Cambridge to speak the truth. He's not scared of anyone here, and he has been open about it, that the government was snooping on most of the opposition leaders, not just in Congress, even outside Congress, and especially Mr. Rahul Gandhi. Yes, the Supreme Court, whatever you said, that might have cleared, but if we do not think maybe the investigation was done in the right way.
Okay, so then why didn't the Congress question and challenge the Supreme Court verdict? Why didn't you go for an appeal? The Supreme Court said, and I'm quoting what the judgment was, it says very clearly that the 5 phones, they found some malware, but it doesn't mean it is malware of Pegasus. That's why the finding appears. Based on the above, it is concluded that 5 out of 29 phones may have just some infection due to malware or due to some poor cyber hygiene. But so I'm saying, if you know that the highest, do you believe in the highest court of land? Is the question, Bhavya.
Can you please repeat your question?
Yes, my question is, why didn't the Congress go for an appeal after this verdict of the Supreme Court, that there was no evidence of Pegasus?
Yes, our president has agreed that it was not, we do not have evidence, but we have, see, when you are in a ruling government and opposition accuses you of something, I think first thing you need to do is give them the confidence that you have done a good investigation, and this is not gonna repeat, or if this has happened or not. We do not have confidence on Narendra Modi's government.
But that was Supreme Court. It was Supreme Court which did. It was Supreme Court that did.
Questions we ask in Parliament.
No, but it was about the Supreme Court investigation.
Mr. Gandhi's speech even in the Parliament. And
okay, RP Singh, respond to this. RP Singh, respond to this, please. Yes.
Maria, before I respond to her, I take a strong objection to his speech in Cambridge. If you noted, he pointed toward a Sikh gentleman, Sikh student, and said, "You are treated as second-class citizen. Your father and your grandmother put together killed 30,000 Sikhs in India, and you dare point a finger toward a Sikh gentleman and say that you are treated as a second-class citizen in India?" This is the problem with Rahul Gandhi. That's why when a fellow panelist was saying that he should speak less, he was right when he said he should speak less, because he doesn't know what he is doing, what he is addressing. He is trying to create ripple or disharmony among the communities from Cambridge. It's something like that when on 6 August 2019, he said, Kashmir mein katleam ho raha hai. There's a bloodshed in Kashmir. And fact is other way around. I remember the date, 6 August 2019. After the 370 and 35A was removed from the Kashmir. So this is the status of the man. This is how 52-year adolescent mind work. That's the problem with us. And as for Pegasus, he said Pegasus, best would have been that he should have gone to the nearest police station, deposited his phone, and would have asked for phone to be checked. He didn't do that because in his phone he has a document which he has signed with Chinese embassy, Chinese Communist Party of China. He has signed a document, and he probably didn't want to share the document with the country, for which they are being paid.
But the larger narrative
has come in installments.
But the larger narrative, Napinai, is about building that image of a surveillance state. That's what is being said here. Then, and at the same time, not providing any evidence for that matter. My question then is, why not get forensic investigators to establish what you are saying and seek credibility? Or are you one of those who would say that with the Supreme Court verdict of no evidence, this entire matter should be put to rest?
Maria, you have raised a most pertinent issue. But before where my lawyer had to respond to you,
yes,
I thought it was rather ironic that the topic was let us learn to listen. It should have probably been let us learn to not listen on the topic. So on that aside,
and why do you say that? Navina, why do you say that?
I start on the legal aspect. See, we normally as a normative behavior, we would relax and do what we please within our homes. But the minute we step out of our home, one of the first rules of conduct is that we would be responsible. And this applies when we are talking about being within the boundaries of India and going outside too. So when we are talking about India, and more so when you're emphasizing the aspect about it being a democracy, the first foundation of democracy is not just the judiciary, but of rule of law and due process. So you had the opportunity to submit yourself to rule of law and due process, including what you rightly pointed out as submitting the phone for verification and for gathering evidence before you shoot off your mouth in terms of what has affected you or not. So follow due process. There is no such thing as you don't have further opportunity when you talk about law. The Supreme Court appointed an independent committee. The committee took a lot of effort and submitted its report. The report gained finality, not proceedings. So if you had an objection to the outcome on the Supreme Court, it was again open to you to approach the court, not just the Supreme Court, but from the lowest to the highest court. as a citizen of India and for citizens of India, I would put it that way. So here is my concern with respect to the statements that have been made. Often I note when I'm traveling outside India that a lot of comments are made to sensationalize an issue rather than to substantiate. We have to now learn to be responsible and follow through with substantiation if you want to make an accusation, or preferably just an averment. An accusation still carries negative connotation. So today, again, you still have the doors of courts open. You still have the opportunity to resort to due process and submit to rule of law if you believe that you have been subjected to surveillance, if you believe that your rights have been violated, because these are rights which each one of us as Indians and India as a nation cherishes and believes in.
Yes.
Therefore, to merely speak about something without substantiation, without evidence, and to make such strong statements to say, yes, I don't have evidence, but I will say what I please, is not the way free speech works. It is nuanced to say that you will speak freely, but you will also exercise this right responsibly. I fail to understand where and in what manner.
So, Bhavya, you are speaking this
without responsibility.
Speaking this as a lawyer.
Yes, indeed.
Yes. Okay, Bhavya. The point here is that if Rahul Gandhi believes that his and others' phone was being snooped on, then why didn't those, including Mr. Gandhi, who believed they were compromised, come forward and submit their handsets for forensic examination? The Supreme Court committee had given the option to the aggrieved. And after the judgment of the apex court, the question is how appropriate is it to talk about it, the manner in which it has been spoken on an international platform, particularly given the challenges that we are seeing, be it Mr. George Soros, who has said it very clearly that he is funding the entire campaign against India. You have the BBC documentary, and then you have a senior leader of a political party travel and talk about democracy under threat, he being a victim of surveillance and everything.
I would like to make a correction in what you said. The BBC documentary was not against entire India. That would be very wrong to say that. It was not a campaign against entire India. It was a documentary on Narendra Modi and what happened in Gujarat.
Okay.
So why would you say it was a campaign against entire India, and why would BBC do something like that? And being an anchor of a news channel, to say something like that would be not even based on facts.
Please, ma'am, go ahead with the point that I raised about not submitting the handset.
BBC didn't do a campaign against India.
Go ahead and please answer the question about approaching the Supreme Court.
What happened in Gujarat?
You have top lawyers as members of the Congress party.
Sorry?
Top lawyers of the Supreme Court are members of the Congress party. Why didn't they approach the Supreme Court if the judgment was flawed?
No, I was just finishing. If BBC documentary, what you spoke about, was not against India, and I think you should first accept that, because we need to take it out that BBC is not against India.
Yes, it is.
Ma'am,
I'm going to raise that point, because if it is factually incorrect, it is against the entire country, and particularly at a time when India is hosting top world leaders as part of G20 presidency. Please go ahead and answer my question related to Rahul Gandhi now. Go ahead, ma'am.
You say it's factually incorrect. Maybe you have your own research. Then why don't you contest against those BBC documentaries?
Yes, because if it is factually incorrect...
Maria, she's going out of the way.
Yes.
Maria, I want to come in.
Yes, Mr. Rajgopal, go ahead.
I want to come in here.
Yes, please.
I am disappointed by the Congress spokesperson. She also toes the line of Rahul Gandhi, because Congress has gone to, decimated in northeastern province. Therefore, Congress leader, Congress spokesperson, including Mallikarjun Kharge, who was Home Minister of Karnataka, he also tapped many telephones, according to Ramakrishna Hegde. I don't know why this Congress spokesperson should research and come to a debate on a national television. And I think Mallikarjun Kharge should field the seniors in the debate, not juniors who do not do
Okay,
research.
okay, Mr. Rajgopalan, with all due respect, it is Congress's discretion to send whosoever they wish to in debates. Bhavya.
For you to say
Ma'am.
Rahul Gandhi should speak
Ma'am.
less would be very
Rahul Gandhi should speak less and talk more and walk more. It is
First, read the
better he
Constitution.
speaks less.
Fundamental basic rights, sir.
Ma'am, this democracy under threat, institutions being compromised, minorities under threat, all that has happened, all this narrative is coming a day after the BJP has won in 2 northeastern states, one of which decisively, and the other they'll be forming the government. And both these northeastern states have almost 70% minorities, the Christians. I mean, for how long will we know about this minorities under threat? Bhavya?
Yeah?
This minorities under threat argument.
Sorry, there is some disturbance. I can't hear your question fully.
Yes.
Twice this has happened. Can you please repeat?
Yes, please. My question is, Rahul Gandhi also talked about, institutions compromised, snooping happening, and minorities under threat.
Yeah. So the minority part is what you're talking about.
Yes.
If you remember, during the anti-CAA protest, the Prime Minister of a country who is supposed to
Cambridge,
give
not
allegiance
the
to
CCA protest.
Constitution said, identify those people
Maria,
protesting
she is
by their
going out of
clothes.
the way from the topic.
Am I not talking about the minorities? Am I not talking about the Muslims? So I have no right
Maria,
to give you
this
the
topic
instance.
is
Why we are saying
different.
this? Why we are
This
saying
topic
that
is about
minorities are the threat?
Cambridge, and I would
That's
like to
because
get
Prime Minister of
enlightenment
this
from the
country
Congress
differentiates
about
based on
the Cambridge speech.
religion.
And it is not like that she can go on talking about CAA. What is that CAA connected with this topic?
Okay, I have just enough time for RP Singh, 30 seconds to you, and then the final words from Napinai. Please go ahead. RP Singh.
Well, thank you, Maria, for one thing that today you have made the Congress spokesperson admit that they were in favor of the CA protest, and then they were there siding by the people who were protesting on CA. Although CA was for minorities' right or minorities to safeguard minorities' interests in Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Bangladesh, especially Sikhs and Hindus or minorities in those countries. But they will not understand. For them, problem is the leader who doesn't know what he's speaking, why he's speaking, and then he talks about judiciary under threat. He talks about media under threat, and personal. He talks about personal freedom. Although they go ahead and speak about Modi ki kabar yahan khodegi, all that sort of rubbish and crap they speak, and still they say there's no freedom of expression. And then the Supreme Court judgment 2 days ago categorically shows that judiciary is free. And Maria, you every day do debates, you call Congress spokesperson on panel, they speak whatever they want to speak, categorically also states that there is a freedom of media. But as I said earlier, that I still take very strong objection to what Rahul Gandhi did to that Sikh gentleman, and he is intentionally doing, knowing that there is a problem already simmering in Punjab. There are Khalistani and radical elements who are already there in Punjab. They'll take cue from this, mark my word, as Imran Khan took cue from his speech and quoted his speech in UN. Now the Khalistanis will take cue from this and say, see, we are treated as second-class citizen in India.
Okay.
That's my bigger question.
Okay, Napinai, specifically on
concern.
snooping and the point of Pegasus, do you think Supreme Court settled that issue and it is being raked up again?
Indeed, Maria, the first point I wanted to make as a closing statement is, one, the petitioners thought fit to go to the Supreme Court. They got their response. It was open to them to contest it further through a review or seek further remedies, which was not done. It is still open to them if they can demonstrate where and how these remedies are sustainable. The second aspect is when you're questioning an outcome, you have to keep in mind that this is not a political debate. You are questioning the outcome through a judicial process.
Yes.
Therefore, we have to be, that's why I emphasize the responsibility aspect.
Okay.
India is a strong democracy. It has a strong rule of law, and we have faith in the system.
Yes.
So if you really have concerns, so please do utilize the system, because we all can't
and the Supreme
forget
Court
that
has the
each
option. Courts
political
of India
party
have the option of
Yes,
review
you
and
have.
appeal. So reach to that. NS Napinai,
And we are all
Rajagopal,
part of the system
Bhavya and RP Singh, really appreciate your time. We are slipping into a short break. Up next, India's global power play at the meeting of G20 and Quad foreign ministers. Has India become the fulcrum of a new and emerging world order?
Mandate, and the Bharatiya Janata Party clearly did not want it to happen. They filed a counter affidavit. Back in the day also when we demanded it, fought for it, they always used to oppose it and did that vociferously. And not just that, we really hope that the letter and spirit of this would also be understood by the Bharatiya Janata Party and implemented for the other institutions. And we would also hope that for the Enforcement Directorate, a similar mechanism is adopted. Why? Because the number of raids and the number of cases are too high. There's a massive gap in the number of cases and in the conviction rate. So if we have a better mechanism, like the one for CEC and the EC, probably we.
So can I ask one question? Can I ask one question? Now, the judiciary, fair enough, the judiciary has pronounced this judgment and no one is disrespecting it, of course. This now becomes the law until otherwise the parliament passes a law to replace this one or strengthen this one. But what about the opposite should also be true? If the judiciary or the chief judicial officer of the country, the Chief Justice of India, has a seat on the table to decide the Chief Election Commissioner, why shouldn't the executive have a seat on the table to decide judges? The corollary should hold just as true.
See, let's understand one thing. The executive has basically some unofficial coalition partners that everybody knows of. And not just that, I gave a very good example of the Enforcement Directorate that there is a massive gap in raids and the number of convictions that are happening. These kind of things are to be taken care of. And who ensures justice in India? It is the Supreme Court. It is the Constitution. That is the law of the land. It is the Supreme Court that safeguards it.
No.
So let's
all of that point well taken. I'll ask Ishkaran this. I think, if you were to take an apples to apples comparison, if the judiciary says in the interest of transparency, we need to be, or at least one of our members needs to be part of the committee that decides who's going to be the Chief Election Commissioner, then why can't the executive turn around and say that we need to have one representative in the interest of transparency and fairness on the appointment of judges?
Zaka, we can have a two-form of debate. One is legally under constitutional scheme. The other is a political debate. For political debate, I think is not the appropriate forum, or the BJP has to do it. But legally and constitutionally, let's deal with it. Not only that, in practice, what will happen with this sort of an election commission appointment system, likelihood of the government and the opposition, whosoever be in power, is very rare that they will agree. So effectively, the casting vote now would be with the Chief Justice, whosoever be the Chief Justice. We can be talking 5 down the line also. So that in a constitutional scheme of things and separation of power, is that the wisest course of action? Philosophically, everybody wants transparency. Everybody knows election commission should be a very transparent, strong body. But what is the best method? But the other question is also there, that if the parliament is not willing to legislate, they still have the choice to legislate, right? End of the day, they are the affected party. But if they don't legislate, they have no option but to follow the law of the land. So the onus is squarely on the parliament or the government, which has the parliamentary majority. Do they bring in a law? And then we can discuss it, because as things stand today, why this? The logical consequence of this could also be tomorrow. It could go on to how is the governor appointed? Should the governor who is in an opposition state be appointed merely by executive, or should there be a panel? So there is no end to that logical, it can happen 5 years down the line.
Yeah. Well, the court said that chief election commissioners and election commissioners have to be appointed on the aid and advice of a panel. That panel will comprise the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition in the Lok Sabha, and the Chief Justice of India. When there is no Leader of the Lok Sabha, then the Leader of the single largest opposition party will play that part. The appointment will be done by the President of India. Now, while the court did say that this will continue to hold good till the law is passed, it is still seen as a setback for the centre, because the court also added that election commissioner's appointment needs to be insulated from executive interference. Now, the centre had expectedly opposed this petition. This is what the centre's contention was, that judiciary cannot interfere in the selection of CEC and ECs. Inclusion of CJI in the process would amount to judicial overreach. Inclusion is in violation of separation of powers. The court can quash appointment if unqualified person is chosen. The presumption that inclusion of judiciary would bring in fairness is wholly flawed. Now, let me go across to both our guests, Ishkaran Bhandari, lawyer and political analyst, Ashpreet Karyal, Congress Party spokesperson, joining us. Ishkaran, why do you consider this order today to be flawed? Because if you can choose, CBI directors and
in an era which is looking more and more like the Cold War, with the two opposing blocs of the United States and Russia, India is setting the global agenda, namely the push for cooperation and resolution. The G20 foreign ministers meet was unable to reach a joint communique due to the war in Ukraine, but for the first time since the war, both Russia and the United States came face to face. India has called for a return to peace via dialogue and diplomacy, but Russia and the United States have drawn the line in the sand. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken appealed to Russia to rejoin the START treaty to limit nuclear weapons, but made it clear it will defend Ukraine till Russia ends the war of aggression. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, however, said the West wants Russia to suffer to achieve its goal of global domination. But India's ability to get the two sides face to face has spurred more nations to appeal to India to use its ties with Russia and the United States and play the peacemaker. Remember, India also addressed the standoff at the LAC during the meeting between S. Jaishankar and his Chinese counterpart, asserting that dialogue is the only solution. Beyond G20, India also led the Indo-Pacific agenda at the meeting of the Quad nations. All nations called for robust cooperation for humanitarian assistance and disaster relief and took a united stand against terror and violent extremism in all forms. The joint statement also reaffirmed the Quad's commitment to supporting free and open trade in the Indo-Pacific. On the Ukraine matter, the Quad foreign ministers said the nuclear option can never be entertained. The big question we ask: has India revamped its role as a global force of cooperation and consensus on the most pressing matters facing us today? In an increasingly polarized world, what more can and should the world expect from India?
On the bulk of the issues, we were able to get an outcome document. There was a chair summary because there were differences on the Ukraine issue which we could not reconcile between various parties who held differing positions. Now, is the conflict impacting the global south? Of course it is.
Interested during these years what is going on in Iraq, what is going on in Afghanistan. Have you been asking the United States and NATO whether they are certain of what they are doing?
Briefly with Russia's Foreign Minister Lavrov on the margins of our G20 meeting today. I urged Russia to reverse its irresponsible decision and return to implementing the New START Treaty, which places verifiable limits on the nuclear arsenals of the United States and the Russian Federation.
Among other things, one of the outcomes we agreed on was that the listings of terrorists, the counter-terrorism side listings should not be politicized.
The future is so much in the Indo-Pacific. Our engagement throughout the region, both through the Quad and in other ways, even as we're rightly focused on what is happening in Ukraine as a result of the Russian aggression. Not just because it matters to Ukrainians and to Ukraine and to Europe, but because it matters to the entire world.
I welcome you to India for the G20 Foreign Ministers meeting.
Joining me now, Fred Wire, political analyst and Russian affairs expert. Joining me from Moscow, Achal Malhotra, former diplomat. Einar Tangent, political affairs commentator from Beijing. Edward P. Thomas, P. Joseph, my apologies, senior fellow in SAIS of Foreign Policy Institute, joining me from Washington. Let me begin with you, Fred. How do you see S. Jaishankar's admission that G20 members failed to arrive at a consensus on the Ukraine-Russia war despite the Bali declaration, which had made a headway? Are special interests then pushing their way and looking to shrink space of members who may have their own strategic interests? Or would you be of the opinion that India has shown that it can get two opposing sides together to at least that will be seen as the first step towards a resolution?
Well, I think on the matter of the Ukraine war, it would have been impossible to bridge the divide between the Western countries and Russia back to China. It's no criticism of India that they failed to do that. They are irreconcilable. The issue here is the G20 a broader kind of forum? And yes, it is. There are a lot of other issues that it's meant to be entertaining, and I think the Indian chairmanship pushed the meeting in the direction of things like global development, the consequences of climate change, a lot of things. The thing that has come into clear focus during this meeting is that countries of the global south are not interested in getting dragged into this battle, this crusade of ideas between the West and Russia over Ukraine. They have other agendas and they want to be heard.
Einar Tangent, do you think the West and Europe is being unreasonable with its position on the Russia-Ukraine war? On the one hand, it is pushing arms and supplies to Ukraine and at the same time wants sanctions on Russia while ensuring its energy security doesn't suffer, of which Russia is a massive supplier. It, however, expects other countries to follow up with stringent sanctions at the cost of its own energy security.
Yes, I think what they're doing is impractical. When war is on your doorstep, I think it's very hard to separate the emotional from the rational. And I think you can see that. But, you know, Europe is far from unified on this. A few days ago, there was whispers that there was going to be a proposal by the UK, France, and Germany to give Ukraine some encouragement to go to the table. But it's very difficult to see, and I agree with my colleague in Washington. The sides are diametrically opposed. It doesn't matter how sweet the music India played during this G20. The people were not ready to dance with each other, and particularly the U.S. has made it clear that they will back Ukraine. Ukraine is in a political position where they said that they won't give an inch, that there can be no talks unless the Russians leave all lands that are disputed. So at this juncture, it's going to take trust to get this whole process restarted. And I think in a multipolar world, it's going to take not just India, but many other BRICS nations, China, Brazil, Indonesia, Turkey, other countries to come together and try to say to these people that maybe you cannot trust each other, but you can trust us to be worthy interlocutors, and we will help you arrange something. In the end, Russia has to have some sense that its security is intact. NATO has to stop expanding. Unless you get to those basic ideas, you cannot unite Ukraine, even under a very loose constitution as proposed in the two previous peace treaties, which unfortunately were apparently just ruses by the French and the Germans, as they have admitted. They had no intention of following through with the Minsk I and II peace plans.
Okay, Achal Malhotra, one thing is clear, that India is at the center of both the G20, given its presidency, and also the ascending world order as well. And we saw what happened at the Quad. There was a joint statement. Is the West now seeing India as a counterweight to China in the region, or is it in line with how India sees itself? Because we have seen how India has really, maintained that independent line. Many would say tightrope war on the Ukraine-Russia war, and it has put its own interest ahead of playing someone else's game.
Well, Maria, first and foremost, the fact that the Americans and the Westerns and the Japanese decided to engage India is that they all consider India to be an important global player, if not leader, which can play an important role, a partner in Asia, Indo-Pacific. Whether it is to counter China, that may not be the only objective, but in the overall context, if you look at the graph, the India's ascendancy, India's ability to make contribution towards resolving issues which are of global dimensions, its ability to identify and raise those issues, whether it is democratization of global institutions of global governance, whether it is climate change, terrorism, name the issues, multilateralism, multipolarity. We have been taking a very firm and proactive stand. We have views on it and we adhere to it, and we are trying to take everybody along with us. Our latest message from the G20 is that let's focus on issues which unite us and take some concrete steps towards resolution and arriving at a consensus, rather than get bogged down by issues which divide us. So India's importance is there. What India has done is that it has very, played a very, it has been very careful in not being seen as a part of any alliance. And it continues to put emphasis on partnerships. That's how we have a comprehensive global partnerships with the United States of America. We have a special and privileged partnership with Russia. We have many other strategic partnerships. We had one also with China, and we have really recently upscaled our relations even with also with Italy to make it a strategic partnership. Meaning we retain our global, our strategic autonomy, and yet we want to play, of course, an important role, and we want to be a part of the rule making rather than just sit and follow or made to follow rules which are being framed by the others.
Okay.
And we want in the whole process the interests and priorities of the global south to be taken into account. It wasn't without any reason that we held a global south summit in the year we are holding the presidency, and the message again is clear that we are willing to take your issues and bridge the divide between the global north and the global south.
Yes, and also with the Quad meeting happening on the sidelines of G20 foreign ministers meet, Edward, is this meant to send a message to China and its allies that while G20 members may have a social and economic purpose, a smaller, more powerful coalition has territorial and military security imperative, which is a strong counterweight to Chinese expansionism?
I think you're absolutely right. It's a strong counterweight to Chinese expansionism. You're absolutely correct, and to Russian aggression here. And I have to, for your viewers, have to clarify and correct this complete distortion of the global reality that was presented by the first two speakers on this program. It's Russia and China that are isolated. There's no balance. There's no balance here whatsoever, including at the G20, which was so skillfully chaired by India. In fact, there's no balance here, some type of division. 17 out of 20, I repeat, 17 out of 20 of the G20 members signed and denounced in a document, signed the document that denounced in the strongest terms Russia's invasion and demanded a complete withdrawal from Ukrainian territory. That's 17 out of 20 of G20. And let's be clear here that we're not just talking about NATO members and the US and the European Union. No, we're coming up on the one-year anniversary of the first of several UN General Assembly resolutions. I repeat, the UN General Assembly, the first one passed by a vote of 141 to 5. So anyone defending Russia needs to explain why only 5 countries disagreed and voted against that initial and several resolutions that followed that deplored in the strongest possible terms, that's a quote, Russian aggression. So there's no debate here about the facts. There's no division here between global South and the West. Everyone agrees this is unprovoked Russian aggression. The notion that there's some kind of parallel here or to anything that NATO has done is completely false. It's meant to fool countries like India, which of course are far too sophisticated. We see the great difference between India, which has diversified its economy, grown a very healthy and impressive IT sector, cooperates with the United States, Australia, and Japan against Chinese aggression, compared to Russia, which is a failed state, relies on fossil fuels that are destroying our and accelerating climate change. So there's simply no comparison here. We have to get the facts to your viewers straight. Russia is the one that's responsible for these rising food prices, the devastation in Ukraine, the attacks on civilians in Ukraine. There's no comparison here. There's no balance whatsoever. There's no comparison. And finally, let me point out, for example, this trope, completely false trope about NATO expansion. Here's the fact. The United States never wanted to expand NATO. That's a fact. The U.S. created something, a waiting room called Partnership for Peace. Bill Clinton never wanted to expand NATO. Why was NATO expanded? For one reason. The demand of the countries themselves, Hungary, then Czechoslovakia, Poland, that wanted to be part of the West and feared Russia. Why did they fear Russia? For the exact reasons you see on your television screens today. Okay. This savage bombardment, this unprovoked aggression against a peaceful neighbor, Ukraine, that simply wanted to join the European Union. Okay. And again, it wasn't even NATO. It was European Union membership that provoked Russian aggression in 2014 in Crimea, and this subsequent effort by a very weak leader, Vladimir Putin, who is ruining his own country, and including, and those who are in the know in Russia know he's destroying and killing
Fred, would you agree
Russian
with
troops who are untrained and unprepared
what Indian Prime
sending
Minister
them into
said in his
battle?
opening
Please.
remarks that it's multilateralism which is in crisis, and look at issues which can be resolved or points of convergences rather than issues which cannot be resolved, and that is the reason why we did not see a joint statement.
Well, yes, of course. It's not multilateralism. It is the insistence of a few big powers on their point of view and putting it front and center. I think we just got a good illustration of that. Global polling shows that majorities of the population, not just the governments, but population in countries like India, Turkey, South Africa, Brazil, do not regard Russia as an adversary. It's very clear that there is this divide between those powers that are clearly involved and see Ukraine as a central issue of our time and our moment, and everyone else. Trade patterns show the same thing. UN General Assembly resolutions are what they are, but the United States routinely ignores it when the UN General Assembly votes against their embargo on Cuba, routinely for decades. It is what it is, but Ukraine is a huge issue, and Russia is, caught in this. I myself don't support the Russian war, but the complexities of our moment the global the split that's happening into a multipolar world. It's unfolding before us, and I wish Americans, I'm a Canadian, so when I say Americans, would come to terms with this and find a new language for addressing especially the global south.
Okay, you know, Edward, before I give the final word to Aina Tangent and Achal Malhotra, one thing that was achieved was that the foreign ministers of the Secretary of State and the foreign minister of Russia came face to face. There was a 10-minute encounter. Of course, there is different version of that encounter. You know, there are versions that it was a pull aside. There are others who say it was an encounter, a chance meeting, but it lasted good 10 minutes.
Yes, and that was valuable. And Secretary of State Antony Blinken told Foreign Minister Lavrov very clearly the U.S. will stand by Ukraine along with its allies as long as it takes, and urged Russia to get back into START for control of nuclear weapons, something that should interest the entire world, and also asked for the release of the arrested and unfairly convicted Paul Whelan to be arrested. So yes, he had that opportunity to convey personally those messages to Lavrov, which was of some utility. But the wider message here for India, and which is so concerned about and legitimately so, this threat from an aggressive China, is that it is China that is the #1 backer of this Russian aggression. And UN General Assembly resolutions do count because we know there's no balance here. It's Russian aggression.
Okay.
And this war that devastates Ukraine and devastates the global economies, including India's, is over as soon as the world unifies against Russian aggression. Then we will see exactly fair-minded and good negotiations that will end with Russian aggression curtailed and will reduce these food prices and terrible inflation. The more the world is united against Russian aggression, the sooner this war ends and peace will prevail.
Okay,
please.
Yeah, my colleague seems to think that by repeating something loudly and making unfounded claims that somehow is a substitute for rationality. I mean, the previous Canadian speaker made it very clear what the statistics are. He's just spouting talk points from the State Department. The fact is the U.S. knew because Kiernan, Kissinger, Biden himself, and the current head of the CIA said if we go into Ukraine and we threaten Russian security, they will fight. So this idea that somehow this was unforeseen, who would have known that the Russians would have attacked? That's nonsense. And it's a real insult to people's intelligence to be just repeating this kind of nonsense.
You know, Achal Malhotra, the differences are out in the open, and we saw that play also on this debate. But the concerns are of India setting the agenda for a G20 because it's on the chair. So the question then is, you know, all that issues that India wants to be on the foreground, be it issues of energy security, food inflation, the rising debt of developing nations, all that, what happens to those issues? Because the war clearly is casting a long shadow on India's presidency.
No, there is absolutely no doubt. We had all anticipated it, and this was one of the biggest challenges that India had to face during its G20 presidency. And, you know, whatever has happened, it has been on the predicted lines. Even when Blinken-Lavrov meeting, you know, had there been some positive, constructive talk about bringing in peace, it would have been a meaningful interaction. But Blinken seemed to have gone with his memorandum of demands, which have already been aired by the United States of America many a times. Lavrov also repeated its own point of view. But you see, you're right that the issues, you know, the issues of global concerns, including of global south, food security, energy security, cyber security, multilateralism, multipolarity, digital divide, hundreds of other issues need to reform the global institutions, World Bank, IMF, UN Security Council. all are there on the table, and I don't think they are falling victim to this Russia Ukraine conflict. Of course, it is having its shadow to the extent that foreign ministers, the finance ministers, meeting ended without a communique. But whatever they debated, whatever they agreed upon, was summarized. There is a document to refer to in the future. So to say that this conflict would wash away our presidency would be going too far. We are working towards bringing about consensus on the issues where we can agree about. There is always room for.
Let's see. Basically, the elephant in the room has been addressed repeatedly, and that elephant is definitely ensuring that the points of convergences are not really arrived at. Thank you so much for your time, Fred Wire, Achal Malhotra, Raina Tangent, and Edward P. Joseph. That's all from me. Thanks so much for watching.
If you remember, the vice president also said about the NJC case that once it was struck down, the parliament didn't have a whisper to speak. So it's for the parliament, the onus is on the parliament and the government. Do they want to bring in a law, or are they wanting to accept it?
So I want to ask Ashpreet Karyal, what the people who are opposed to this judgment today are saying is, yes, the Election Commission is an independent institution, but the appointment of Chief Election Commissioner and election commissioners is an executive appointment. It's an executive decision. If you want to bring in fairness, fair enough. You can have one person from the government and one person from the opposition. But when you bring in a judicial officer, when you bring in the Chief Justice of India, that is judicial overreach. It's not the business of the judiciary to be making appointments or recommending appointments.
Well, says the Bharatiya Janata Party, who apparently considers themselves judge, jury, and executioner. Well, sorry, what they say is immaterial because the Supreme Court has already decided on this, and we are bound by what the Supreme Court does. Number two, if the Bharatiya Janata Party does not like it, please challenge it. You're free to do that. But until and unless it's being done away with, you should rather just follow it instead of criticizing it. Because some of your leaders back in the day used to say that Supreme Court is infallible. What happened to that? Stop contradicting yourself. Number two, it's a welcome step. It's a great step. We appreciate it, commend it. And the Bharatiya Janata Party clearly did not want it to happen. They filed a counter affidavit. Back in the day also when we demanded it, fought for it, they always used to oppose it and did that vociferously. And not just that, we really hope that the letter and spirit of this would also be understood by the Bharatiya Janata Party and implemented for the other institutions. And we would also hope that for the Enforcement Directorate, a similar mechanism is adopted. Why? Because the number of raids and the number of cases are too high. There's a massive gap in the number of cases and in the conviction rate. So if we have a better mechanism, like the one for CEC and the EC, probably we.
So can I ask one question? Can I ask one question? Now, the judiciary, fair enough, the judiciary has pronounced this judgment and no one is disrespecting it, of course. This now becomes the law until otherwise the parliament passes a law to replace this one or strengthen this one. But what about
Namaste, Jai Hind and welcome to this edition of The Right Stand. I am Anand Narasimhan. The Supreme Court of India on Thursday ruled that a high-power committee will be formed constituting the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition in the Lok Sabha and the Chief Justice of India to appoint the Chief Election Commissioner and the Election Commissioners. The Election Commissioner of India and the Election Commissioners till date were appointed by the ruling party at the centre. For the last 73 years plus, this has been the norm, ladies and gentlemen. However, the Supreme Court's decision has taken away the solo decision, making the right and West the right